if you're locked into chronic exhaustion, your mind hijacked by fear and intrusive thoughts, and nothing you've tried has shifted it. You could very well be compromised. Most people assume the problem is internal, but entity interference can lock your nervous system into a chronic survival state and block the very window your brain uses to spiritually re-regulate. No healing tool will override it while the interference is still active. I'm Tracey and I've spent the last decade commanding and releasing entity interference at the highest levels. I literally wrote the book on it. And in this episode, I'm going to walk you through exactly how entities compromise your central nervous system and what you can do about it. So, in order to understand how they compromise the central nervous system, you have to understand spiritual development and healing. We are here to step out of the constraints of the mind. We are all here to step into sovereignty. Sovereignty is our right to enact our destiny without interference. We come to earth because we get to engage with free will and choice. And a lot of our lessons play out through duality, which is the level of the mind, but it is like fear-based states and programming, inherited influences, preconditioning. So again, we hold all of these kind of trauma responses and, inherited influences and almost like unconscious beliefs about ourselves. Entities need an attachment mechanism, and the biggest attachment mechanism is the brain, is the mind, is the lower frequencies and lower fear-based programming. And entities need a likeness, so there has to be a resonance or a match. There's different types of entities, they almost do different things. There is demonic realms, which is one. And they simply feed off suffering and fear-based programs. So what they can do is they can attach to almost the lower mental, so the mind at this lower kind of level of fear-based programming and conditioning. And they can amplify these things. So they can amplify like our negative bias or our negative thought associations about ourselves. They can almost even some, depending on the type of entity interference, even implant kind of directive. But it is really amplifying almost like conditionality that's already in place. So they will create a fracturing at a mind level. A lot of people don't understand with spiritual development. They talk about just opening your heart and living in your heart space and all elevating, right? And creating this kind of spiritual re-regulation. To an extent, yes, the gateway to our spiritual aspects does exist through the heart. But we have to engage the mind, or rather we have to release or reprogram, recondition neural networks and pathways and heal the past to elevate. So the brain actually has to be like capable of holding higher vibrational states or higher vibrational frequency. That is expanded consciousness. And entities can almost lock trauma in place. So if someone's doing a lot of trauma repatterning and, working with unconscious beliefs and programs, if they're not working directly with the entities that are holding some of those things in place, they can kind of just be endlessly trying to re-regulate, but almost this overarching theme or, restriction still presents in their life. So that's one way that entities will affect the central nervous system or, brain structures, programming, but they can create overload for somebody. If somebody is even empathic in nature and they almost have this huge field that engages or over-engages with other people's trauma, energy, they will be creating transference. And again, a lot of people don't understand that the brain is a sensory organ and it actually has to read all of this information. So if you're bombarded all the time and you have, because certain people will run energetic programs and will often have more entity interference than others, there's reasoning why. If any of this resonates with you and you want to understand on a deeper level, please, this book that I created is almost like it explains in depth all the types of interference, why they attach, how they attach, the brain, the body, the higher spiritual bodies. All of this information is in here. In the comments below, you'll be able to see where you can actually purchase that book, and it just gives a better understanding. Conscious awareness is key to making change. But people don't understand. They're literally reading, and their brain will go on overload if there's too much sensory information, and entities can create this overload or overstimulation because the brain is trying to process all of this information, and with it there's almost this level of unsafety. And we can sense things. You know how like you might go somewhere and you know when it has a really beautiful energy, you just know it, where other times you'll go somewhere and you'll be like, oh my god, I could just feel this energy and it wasn't nice. Underneath, you will be kind of reacting to that. Your energy will go into like a survival stress state. So again, entities can, via energetics or even the engagement to your field, push you into an overload or a stress state in the central nervous system. And a nervous system that is engaged continuously, a nervous system that is on overload from too much energetic, almost attachment, will end up getting locked into that state of the sympathetic nervous system dominance. Again, if you don't understand sympathetic nervous system dominance and healing, please understand it's one of the biggest key things in healing, and entities can really manipulate that state. But the main reason they manipulate that state is we, at the end of the day, are multidimensional spiritual beings having this kind of human experience, right? And so we're here to elevate, we're here to reconnect, we're here to almost receive that higher directive from our soul and embody it, right? And that's what we're here to do, to follow that soul progression path. So you can have entity interference that connects into somebody's 10th dimensional aspect, high multidimensional interference, severing a person's connection, holding them in something, people will call it dark night of the soul, but there's actually something higher. There's something called suspended animation. It's almost like you're locked out of your divinity. It's like you're enslaved at a higher level. And entities, one, they do feed off suffering, but high multidimensional entities actually claim people's gifts for themselves. We're like an energetic source. They siphon energy. So when somebody has a multidimensional engagement like that, it creates a fracturing. It creates a disconnection. The spiritual, right, brings order to the physical. It's a template. And when someone's not connected to that, it will erode, it will deteriorate the physical, especially the mind, has nowhere to kind of reorient, can't even say that word, reorientate. Don't think I got it right, but anyway. Two, it can't almost redirect itself. It doesn't have this higher mind association or this higher directive, and it can get lost in fields of deregulation. So the most dangerous entity interference is often the one that people will chase their whole entire life. They do endless healing. I see it all the time. They come to me and they're healers and they've done 20, 30 years plus. And they can't understand why they're still in physical decline through their central nervous system into their physical and their transformation journey. It's just not matching up when they're doing and putting the hard work in to create change, realignment, spiritual development. But they're not seeing these key pieces that lock somebody out of re-regulation. Another place is transition states. So when we go to sleep at night, there is the time of the liver, which is 1 to 3. And this is actually the time we reconnect with our spiritual guidance and receive directive for the next day. It's a huge, it's probably the most important transition or the most important time of the day for spiritual reconnection. Entities can lock someone out of that reconnection to their spiritual self. They can also do a lot more in that time. Again, that is the time that brain chemistry replenishes itself. If you are not being able to reconnect at a higher reordering to your spiritual connection because you're stuck in suspended animation, you've got entities that have infiltrated, creating a decline, you won't get what you need to be able to recover, replenish, and your brain be able to update. And remember, I talked about the brain being key in conscious expansion and elevation. There's a lot of other things that can occur at that time of night. It's actually called negative astral travel, and a lot of entities can create a lot of decline, acts as a gateway to come in. Another way that I see very regularly, in fact 2 more ways, is people will create a gateway through their mind. The amygdala is the fight or flight structure of the brain, of the nervous system. And it's either looking to keep us safe or looking for danger, right? Same thing. Or it looks for opportunity and gratification. And what I see regularly is people will go and maybe take drugs or maybe engage with too much alcohol. I'm not saying a little bit of alcohol is going to do that, but in these states of looking for like an altered reality or expansion or gratification, and they end up creating, again, a fracturing through the mind. It opens gateways. It's like they've looked for expansion in the wrong places. And these gateways can remain open, and they can constantly allow entity interference to affect neurological capabilities, up-leveling spiritually, because the brain is part of spiritual development, regardless of whether people talk about, they often talk about bypassing the mind. It's actually not. And then another point to the central nervous system is how I talked about sovereignty, that we're all here to elevate, we're all here to enact our own or extend into our own sovereign domain. And that's the point of life. You know what I mean. But anyway, what I see all the time is when a child is growing up, they don't have that much they don't have that much choice available to them, right? They're sort of under the directive of their parents. And their parents are meant to be the gatekeeper until they're 16. They protect their sovereignty. They look after them. But if there was drugs, if there was abuse, if there was, I don't know, just so much like trauma, if there was absence, if there was neglect, it goes on and on and on. If the parent had a lot of their own demons and trauma, even as a child, we'll model the parent's central nervous system. And again, they could have a lot of entity interference running through their central nervous system, and we've picked it up through almost mirroring energetics. There's lots of ways you can pick up entity interference. But the main one would be the parent did not gatekeep the child properly, and they've left them open to entity interference. High-level entity interference steps in and almost claims your rights to your sovereignty, your rights to, spiritual re-regulation. It's almost like you don't even own your own spiritual templates. You don't own the right to even elevate out of this agreement or this relationship that's in place at a really high multi-dimensional level. So people will endlessly work on their parents. They will work on these faces that were in this lifetime, right, in the physical kind of form, but they're not looking at the multidimensional representations that sit behind it that create in slavery at a really high spiritual level. And anything that does that, you will not be able to reorder trauma properly. You will not be able to step out of these trauma bonds, and it will affect even the mind being able to update. There's a lot of other ways. The central nervous system is vast. I see people a lot of the time doing endless kind of spiritual healing and even activations. Honestly, people will be opening themselves up to all of these activations. They don't actually know what they're opening themselves up to, especially when people think, the spiritual's all love and light. It is not. And even spiritual activations could take you out of alignment through the brain. The brain's actually holographic, and it holds a template to link back to the holographic universe. And everybody's almost connected in a different way because their divinity, their structures, their energetic signature is specific to them. So you may go and do high multi-dimensional healing or activation somewhere else, but it could actually create a misalignment through neurological conductivity. And for you, it opens gateways to different types of multi-dimensional presence that are unaligned. Anything that unaligns you from your template, from even this to the higher spiritual, will create a fracturing and a misalignment to you really stepping into your higher soul's progression path. So, the central nervous system has a lot of interlinks, but maybe one thing I'll leave this on is I like to say entity interference can see all of our spiritual matrices. They can see all of our, unresolved things that we've got that we need to heal, all of these places, and that's what they're looking for, but they need a likeness, and then they attach to these structures. Sometimes it is physical structures at a neurological level. It could even be body structures, different organs and glands, or it could be the higher spiritual alignments to the spiritual body, but anything will create an unalignment to mind, body, soul. Again, we have to be in alignment. So, They can also anchor PTSD in the brain. It's another big area that I work with in healing. In order to heal PTSD, you have to look at it from the neurological trauma that took place in the physical, but you could also have a lot of entity interference that lock decline at these brain states and have it holding it on like an endless loop in healing, especially if it was a really traumatic, dark event. You're not just dealing with a brain in a state of trauma, you're dealing with all the entities that have attached to that situation. So you need to work with them hand in hand. But entities essentially anchor trauma, anchor the brain into a non-development or a way that it can't up-level. And all development has to engage with neural networks and pathways, re-regulating, to create this way of holding a higher vibrational engagement. So if you like this episode, please subscribe or follow. And if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next episode.